A shocking and brutal fate will befall this innocent young woman, and it will all start with an absolutely forbidden transformation. This breathtaking masterpiece captures her here at the beginning of the story. The ending of the story, however, will be disturbing, heartbreaking, jaw-dropping, and inspiring. It also changed history forever. This is not a myth. It's a true story. It's a real masterpiece. The painting you're about to see is one of the most famous depictions ever of Joan of Arc. Many consider it the most psychologically powerful portrayal of her in all of art history. And hidden inside it is a story far more disturbing than it first appears. At first glance, it looks almost peaceful. A teenage girl standing barefoot in a garden in rural France. She wears simple peasant clothing, but behind her, a spinning wheel sits abandoned, a stool overturned on the ground. And look more closely, something strange is happening in the branches behind her. Faint, ghostly figures begin to emerge from the foliage, barely visible, almost transparent, hovering in the air like an apparition. According to Joan, voices were about to ask something of her that medieval Europe considered almost unthinkable, something that would shatter the rules of the world, that would terrify kings and church officials, and that would hurtle her down a violent and unstoppable path. Once you learn what this painting is really hiding, and what those voices asked of this girl, you'll understand why this seemingly quiet painting contains one of the most extraordinary and horrifying stories in all of European history. Welcome to a masterpiece, one of the greatest in any museum on Earth. This enormous masterpiece painting, 8 feet by 9 feet, stands in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. And if you're there in front of it, you feel as if you could step into the garden yourself. It's called simply Joan of Arc, and the painter was Jules Bastien-Lepage. Bastien-Lepage painted this underrated gem with an almost photographic realism, mixed with pieces of impressionism in the flowers and on the wall. Every blade of grass, every leaf, every fold of fabric is rendered with meticulous precision. The natural surroundings feel so vivid that many viewers become completely absorbed in the landscape before they even notice the figures floating behind Joan's head. And this is exactly what the artist intended. Joan stands in the foreground, her body tense. Her bare toes are clenched, gripping the dirt beneath her feet. A small but extraordinary detail that betrays the intensity of what's happening inside of her. Her left hand reaches out to steady herself on a tree branch, as if the force of what she's hearing might knock her completely over. Her cheeks are flushed red, and her eyes, those wide, piercing, almost glassy blue eyes, stare upward and outward, not at us, not at the garden either, but at something beyond the frame of the painting entirely. Behind her, 3 figures hover among the trees. Saint Michael, dressed in golden armor, Saint Margaret, and Saint Catherine. They're painted in a completely different style from everything else, translucent, faint, and like a vision dissolving into the leaves. Critics at the Salon of 1880 noticed this immediately. They praised Joan's figure as supremely convincing, but found the ghosts jarring. But that contradiction is the entire point. Bastien-Lepage, the painter, was asking a question that no one in the 15th century would have dared to ask, and that even in the 19th century felt uncomfortable. Are we watching divine inspiration? Or are we watching a teenage girl simply begin to hear crazy voices in her head? The ambiguity is what makes this painting so modern and so unsettling. Let's talk about the artist for a moment. Jules Bastien Lepage was born in 1848 in the rural province of Lorraine, the same region where Joan of Arc herself had been born 4 centuries earlier. Like Joan, he came from a poor family, and like Joan, he knew the rhythms of peasant life firsthand. Also like Joan, he'd been shaped by war. In 1870, Bastien Lepage was wounded in the chest during the Franco-Prussian War, the same conflict that saw France lose the province of Lorraine to Germany. When the war ended, Joan of Arc suddenly became the most powerful symbol of French resilience, and Bastien Lepage, recovering from his wounds and mourning his stolen homeland, turned to his region's greatest heroine for inspiration. He spent 4 years developing the composition, producing at least 14 preparatory studies. His first concept showed Joan kneeling before an altar, a more conventional religious image. But he abandoned the idea. He wanted something more honest and more grounded. He placed her instead in his own family's garden, barefoot, in plain peasant clothes. The model was his cousin, Marie Adèle Baubert, though her face was reportedly a composite of 2 local girls from Lorraine. He wanted to capture, as he wrote to a friend, the resolution to leave her home while still retaining an entirely naive peasant charm. He saw himself as an heir to the realist tradition of Millet and Courbet, and he believed in a single principle above all: nothing is good but truth. Bastien Lepage died just 5 years after completing this painting, at the age of 36, from stomach cancer. He never knew that this Joan of Arc would become his most enduring legacy. Now, let us look more carefully at what this painting is really showing us, because there are details here that most viewers walk right past. Start with the overturned stool and the abandoned spinning wheel in the background. This isn't just set decoration. The spinning wheel was the symbol of a woman's proper role in medieval society. Sitting at your wheel, making thread, that was what a girl like Joan was supposed to do. The overturned stool tells us that she has just leaped to her feet. She has literally knocked over the life she was expected to live. Now look again at her left arm. It stretches outward, fingers extended, reaching towards something beyond the edge of the canvas, toward the world outside the garden. Some scholars have read this as Joan reaching towards her destiny, toward the battlefield, toward France itself. She's being pulled in 2 directions at once, the garden behind her and the war ahead of her. And notice the hem of her dress. It's damp, brushed with the dew of the garden weeds. This is the last moment this dress will define her. During her trial later on, Joan described exactly what happened in this garden. She said, "When I was 13 years old, I heard a voice from God to help guide me. The first time I was very much afraid. The voice came toward noon in the summer in my father's garden." She also described a blinding brightness. There was much light all about, as when the sun shines. When the judges later tried to make her admit the visions were illusions, she refused with an intensity that is still striking 5 centuries later. The quote from the records is, "I saw them with these eyes as well as I see you now. When they departed from me, I wept, and I wished they would take me with them." This is that moment that Bastien Lepage chose to paint, not the battlefield or the trial, the moment in the garden when a 13-year-old girl's life broke in 2. But here's where the story becomes truly extraordinary. What Joan did next was something medieval Europe considered almost as shocking as her claim to hear the voice of God. She cut her hair, she put on men's clothing, and she dressed in armor. She lived as a man among soldiers. This was not a small thing. In the 15th century, the boundary between male and female clothing was treated as something close to sacred law. For a woman to dress as a man was considered an act of defiance against the natural order, an abomination. And Joan didn't simply disguise herself temporarily. She wore men's clothing constantly, in camp, in court, and even in prison. Before Joan was allowed anywhere near the French army, the royal court needed proof that she was who she claimed to be. So they ordered something remarkable, a physical examination of her virginity, conducted not by male clerics, but by noblewomen. A contemporary chronicler recorded that the Queen of Sicily had her examined by honorable matrons and ladies who found that she was a virgin and had lived well. The confirmation of her purity at the time was essential. Her entire identity, la pucelle, the maid, rested on it. Once she was cleared, Joan went to meet the king. But Charles VII was not about to take a peasant girl at her word. He reportedly tried to trick her. He hid among the courtiers while another man sat on the throne pretending to be the king. According to several accounts, Joan walked straight past the impostor and identified Charles correctly. Whether embellished or not, the story spread through the court like wildfire. This girl knew things that she shouldn't have known. She also dictated bold letters to the English commanders. And remember, she couldn't read or write, but she warned them in her own voice. King of England and you, Duke of Bedford, surrender to the Maid of Keys of all the good towns that you have taken and violated in France. And then came the threat. If you do not do so, I am a war leader, and wherever I find your people in France, I will drive them out. The letter ends with a line that's almost impossible to believe came from a teenage peasant girl who couldn't even sign her own name. If they will not obey, I will have them all killed. She also imposed an almost unheard of moral discipline on the soldiers around her. She demanded that they stop swearing, that they confess their sins, that they attend mass, and remarkably, stop visiting prostitutes. Hardened soldiers obeyed the teenage peasant girl. That alone tells you something about the force of her presence. And yet in battle, she usually carried not a sword, but a banner showing Christ and angels. When asked why, she said she preferred her banner because it had never killed anyone. She was struck in the shoulder by an arrow at the siege of Orléans. The arrow penetrated deeply, but after it was pulled out, she returned to the battlefield the same day, astonishing soldiers whom had assumed that she was finished. Before we continue, a quick reminder that if you would like to have this painting in your home, you can purchase it directly from my website. You can find the link in the description. Shipping is completely free worldwide, and if you're a true art enthusiast, I encourage you to explore my catalog, where you'll find many more hand-selected masterpiece paintings, and you'll also be helping me keep making videos like this every week. Thank you. Now, let's get on with the story. Joan was captured in 1430 and sold to the English, but she didn't go quietly. After being taken prisoner, she was held in a tower in Beaurevoir, and Joan, remember this teenage girl in chains, jumped from a height of roughly 60 feet to escape. Yet she survived the fall. She later said she attempted the leap because she feared being handed over to the English. Even her captors could not believe that she had lived. But they handed her over anyway, and the English put her on trial for heresy and sorcery. Now here is what most people don't realize. The most dangerous charge at her trial wasn't the voices. It wasn't her claim to speak with saints even. It was her clothing. The judges interrogated her about it repeatedly. Why did you dress as a man? Who told you to? And would she agree to wear women's clothes again? But she refused. She told the court, "This dress is the most suitable among men." And a friar who attended her before her execution later testified that Joan had told him she swore men's clothing defended her modesty. That was because she was locked in a cell with male soldiers and no female attendants. The outfit perhaps protected her. She repeatedly begged to be moved to a church prison. Her exact words are recorded. "I ask you to have me taken to a church prison where I shall have women to guard me." But her request was refused. A court usher later testified about her conditions. She was kept in the castle of Rouen in an iron cage, chained by the feet and hands and guarded by English soldiers. The trial itself produced some of the most extraordinary exchanges ever recorded in a European courtroom. When the judges threatened to torture her, Joan answered, "Truly, if you were to tear me limb from limb and separate my soul from my body, I would say nothing else. And if I did say something else, afterward I would always say that you made me say it by force." When they mocked her claim that God spoke to her directly, she replied quietly, "God has something to reveal to you, and you will wish that you had let me go." The judges pressed whether the saints spoke French, and Joan answered, "Why should they speak English, since they are not on the English side after all?" This reportedly drew laughter in the courtroom. When asked about France's chances in the war, she said with absolute certainty, "I know well that the English will be driven out of France, except for those who die there." And near the end of the trial, when asked what would happen to her, she answered with a calm that is almost unbearable to read. "Everything I have said or done has been in God's hands." At one point during the trial, Joan was pressured into signing a document that she couldn't read, briefly agreeing to wear women's clothing. Days later, she put the men's clothing back on. The court used this single act to condemn her as a relapsed heretic. That decision sealed her fate. On May 30th, 1431, Joan of Arc was burned alive in the public square in Rouen. She was only 19 years old. She was placed on a raised scaffold of plaster and wood so that the crowd would see. Witnesses said she asked for a cross to hold. A soldier made one from 2 sticks. A friar held a church crucifix before her face. She cried the name of Jesus over and over, even, witnesses said, until the very last breath. After the fire, the authorities burned her body again, and then a third time, to make absolutely sure nothing remained that could become a relic. Her ashes were then thrown into the Seine. Witnesses at the rehabilitation trial decades later described the crowd as shaken, weeping. The executioner himself reportedly said afterward, "Would that my soul were where I believe the soul of that woman is." Now look at the painting one last time. This is the moment before all of that, before the armor and the battles and the trial, before the fire. Just a barefoot girl in a garden, gripping a tree branch, her toes dug into the dirt and her eyes wide with something between terror and conviction. Bastien Lepage strips away every piece of mythology and gives us the most human version of Joan of Arc ever painted. A peasant teenager hearing something no one else can hear, and about to walk into a world that will first worship her and then destroy her. 25 years after her execution, the Catholic Church reopened Joan's case. Her trial was declared corrupt and unjust. And in 1920, nearly 500 years after her death, Joan of Arc was canonized as a saint. A girl who couldn't read or write, who dressed as a man and commanded armies, who stood before a court of powerful men designed to break her and gave answers that still echo through the centuries. The executioner feared he had burned a saint, It turns out he was right. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this painting in the comment section. What strikes you the most? Joan's defiance under threat of torture, the fact that it was her clothing that ultimately killed her, or those haunting blue eyes that seem to see something we don't? I recommend you spend some time with this painting if you're in New York City. And if you can't go, you can bring it right into your home. Click the link below in the description to check out my website, where you can find this and many more fantastic masterpieces of the world, hand-selected and high-quality prints. Shipping is totally free worldwide. Thank you for watching all the way until the end, and I'll see you in the next video, where we continue to explore the great masterpieces in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York and everywhere around the world.